a different place to film, but as I always do it, I got to a place early, before my friend, when we had agreed to meet. So I figured, I'm gonna see if I can use this time, a little bit productively and just have a chat. So very recently, I finished knitting the Hannah sweater. That is a gift from my sister. I do have it at home technically, but I'll be giving it to her later this afternoon. And yeah, it's this sweater. So basically what happened there is I pretty much told my sister, I showed her the website Ravelry, and I was like, I can knit anything on this website. Pick something and I will make it for you. And she picked a design that was mostly stocking knit. But that's not to say that I didn't learn anything doing it. I was trying to figure out how to say, my assumption of knowing how to, forgive me. So just to clarify, I did finish the pattern, and as I was reading the pattern, I figured out how to do it. But I think when I said that I can knit anything on this website, I was like, I feel confident that I don't know everything yet, but I know that I will be able to learn it. Which is what ended up happening here. I've never done a V-neck before, but the principles pretty much are very similar to other cardigans that I've done. So you do the back panel, and then you pick up stitches here, you do the increases to make the V, and unlike with a cardigan, in a sweater, of course, you join the front so that it's continuous across the front. I found really interesting the process of doing, just knitting the V-neck ribbing. I worried a little bit about it being floppy, or that the edge would not be, that it would not be tight, that it would not look good and crisp. But in the pattern, Petite Knit, I think Nikki might be her name. I definitely said that wrong, so I'm very, very sorry. But you can tell she's been designing patterns for a very long time, or at the very least, she's clearly very good at it. So what she's done there, just to tighten up the edges, is you basically do 2 rows of double knitting, and then you bind off with a tubular bind off. I'll be honest here and actually say, I've actually never done, I've never learned how to do a tubular bind off, Italian bind off, I think some people call it. But I put it off for so long because I didn't want to thread, needle, and yarn through that many stitches. But in this case, I wanted, because it's a gift, I wanted it to look very, very good for my sister. And I also, again, just with that neck, I didn't want it to be floppy. And either with the combination of the double knitting or the bind off style, it did hold very well, and it looks very tidy. And I learned a new technique that I will probably do for all my complaining about how annoying it is threading, especially if you're binding off over 200 stitches. It is very, very annoying trying to thread through and bind off by needle, by threading through all those stitches. But I do believe in this case it very much was worth it. So regretfully, to my immense regret, I believe I will continue doing this henceforth for most of my other patterns. I am, by the way, right now wearing the Coline sweater. I did it as a test knit. Yarnflakes, Audrey has since made all her patterns free. So I did this as a test knit. Originally the pattern goes for a lot longer. It's a full length sweater, but I made it fairly cropped. And I just like to wear it over high-waisted skirts and dresses. I knit this in Bio Shetland BC Garn, and I don't quite recall the color combinations, but I'll include them in the description below. I have, after I finish the sweater, because I intend to work on the Yell cardigan by Marie Wallen. I first started that project crazily about 3 years ago now, which is amazing how time flies. And I really, I keep meaning to pick that up, but because I have to figure out the logistics of the steeking And I've done enough of the body where I need to start moving on to the sleeves, and that's staked. And because I haven't done the pattern in a while, it means I have to reread it and become acquainted with it again. And I've been feeling really lazy, so instead I've chosen to knit socks. This is the only pattern ever that I've knitted like multiple copies of. This is my third pair of the Petal Drop Socks. Technically, I did knit the other two pairs, and I should have covered them in my last podcast, knitting podcast. I forgot, clearly. I forgot to include them. But it's Petal Drop Socks by Florence Miller. And it's a very beginner-friendly pattern. I believe she even has a YouTube video tutorial on how to make it. But it's essentially just got a really beautiful, consistent cable. You knit from the top down. The heel looks like so. And then you do a Kitchener grafting to bind off the stitches at the toe. I am using the West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply sock yarn in the colour Milk Bottle. I bought two balls of this. I have, because it came in one of those like commercial things, like commercially bound stuff. I have taken the time to wind it into a ball, just because I find that kind of format of the yarn, especially because this is quite thin, by the time that you end up getting to the end of the ball, it tangles quite a bit, which is what happened with the other two pairs of socks that I knit. So I'm hoping that now that I have this in much more condensed form, which makes it a lot easier to carry around as well, because I knit quite a bit on the go, I'm hoping that this will tangle less and be far more portable. But I can speak honestly as to how this has survived for me, given that I knitted these probably more than 2 months ago, and I've just been wearing them fairly consistently since. So what I should say first is that I am very hard wearing on my socks. Actually, I forgot. I'm actually wearing a pair right now. I'll see if there's a way for me to show you. I am in a car in a public place, and I don't know how I can wave my feet around, but oh my god. So that Doc Martens. But yeah, so that's kind of that's what the Petal Drop socks look like the worn ones. This is amazing. I completely forgot that I was wearing them. Basically, they are Hello, I am again in my car. This time I am an hour early for a job interview. I do excuse myself for being this early because it's at a location that I didn't know, and also it's a job interview. You definitely don't want to be late. However, I am once more an hour early. I'm also incidentally wearing exactly the same thing that I was wearing the last time I filmed something. And I believe I was talking about the Petal Drop socks. So I've knitted 3 pairs of these. I should clarify, it was yesterday that I filmed the other one. So I'm wearing, I'm wearing them now. They look very nice, and because I tend to wear, I wear Doc Martens. I only have Doc Martens. I have 3 pairs of shoes, and that's it. And a pair of gym trainers. But, I have a pair of kind of more Black Mary Jane style shoes. These look very nice with that as well, but this is what it looks like with the loafers, and you'll just see the cabling show quite nicely. I am very hard wearing on my socks. Because my shoes are quite heavy, and also just because I walk around quite a bit. I use public transport because I work in the city, and parking is exorbitant in the city. And I think also, I am just by personality quite a bouncy person. I move around quite a bit. So between a combination of all that, I tend to be very hard wearing on my socks. I knitted my first pair of socks in the Katia yarn, and then the other pairs I've been knitting in the West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply in the colour Milk Bottle. The Katia yarn has held up much better. This may be in part because I prefer the color of the milk bottle. It's more of like a pure white, and I just find that looks better with my socks, but with my various shoes. But I've noticed a lot less fraying with the Katia sock. And the fiber itself is also like the Katia one is harder and denser, to be fair. And in contrast, the West Yorkshire one it's softer. It feels less densely plied. I believe the wool to the other one, nylon content percentage is about similar. I believe they're both 75% wool to 25% the other thing that I can't remember. But I've just noticed less felting. In both cases, in the cases of both socks, I have felted the heel completely and the tips of the toes. I still think everything is held up remarkably well, considering that I have been wearing these every time that they're clean and out of the wash. So this would be at least once a week for both the socks. I don't wash them every time because I understand wool is self-cleansing. And unless I've gone to the gym or something and I'm like, oh, I don't want to wear these again, I have worn them maybe 2-3 days in a row. I'll see if I can just show you real quick. I might see if I can do a comparison of what the new socks and versus the felted ones look like. But this is the one I was wearing just now. You'll just see the heel has felted together considerably, and the toes. Everything else in the sock is and the bottom of the sock has felted together quite a bit, which isn't too bad for a sock. You do want those parts to be denser. What I was always wondering about knitted socks is because it's perhaps not as elastic as ribbed cotton with plastic elastic in it. I was wondering how well they would stay up. I don't know if it's the cables on the leg of the sock, but it doesn't slide down as much as I thought it would. I don't have to constantly pull my socks up as I go throughout the day, which I do have to for my cotton socks, which is really quite nice. I have the black Mary Janes, I have my brown loafers, and then I also have a pair of just black boots from Doc Martens. And I forgot to mention, almost all of my shoes have platforms in them, so they are very heavy shoes. And even when I wear these socks in the boots, they've held up really well. And yeah, I really it's the other thing I will say for these socks, and as to why I've knitted 3 pairs of them, is it's a very easy pattern to memorize. I believe Florence even has a video tutorial on how to make these socks. I believe it was designed as a beginner-friendly pattern. It's also just a delight to do, but because the cable is quite easy to memorize, and it's repetitive, but it's interesting enough to keep going. And I think perhaps because you have to do 2 of the same pattern to make a pair of socks, I had memorized the pattern by the time I finished that first pair. So when I ran out of mental capacity and I was like, I just need something easy to do, it was very easy to cast on that second pair of socks just as I'd memorized it. I'm kind of tempted. Oh, actually, forgive me. I'll just show you So this is a project bag from Petal Knits. I really enjoyed this. She made this for the solstice, I believe. It's one of her newer bag designs, because otherwise she just has a flat drawstring. I have one of the larger project bags of that as well, but this one has a very interesting 4-cornered drawstring design. And I really like this one. This is my preferred of the 2 project bags. It is also, despite what it looks like, quite sizable. I've been putting entire cardigans and sweaters in this. I actually don't use the other larger project bag at all, just because that takes up a lot of space. But this one, I can roll up the cardigan and just fit in quite nicely. And as with all of their stuff, it's very beautiful linen quality. they've got hand embroidery down the sides. And just because it is linen, I did find that it was fraying, so I've used some nail polish to kind of like make sure the ends don't fray anymore. A trick that I learned from when I had to wear tights all the time to stop like runs in the tights. But this is the sock. It's very shriveled because it's currently not on anything. But I guess this is what the heel looks like when it's not felted together. You just slip the second stitch to create that ridge, and then you purl all the stitches in the following wrong side row. And what the cabling looks like, the front of the cable, the front of the sock, and I've very nearly finished the second sock. I believe I have this much more to do, and then I'll start the heel of the toe. I will be honest and mention that I actually had never done Kitchener stitch before. I'd done like a 3-needle bind off in the past because I really don't enjoy threading a needle through all the stitches that I've done, but it is worth it. It makes a very seamless bind off. And a part of my resistance was I didn't want to have to do a technique where I had to, because you had, like, it's not as simple, like, you just knit along. You have to go, like, you put it through the back loop and the front loop, and you put it knitwise and purlwise. But it is worth, unfortunately, taking the steps to do that. It creates a very, like, let's see if I can show you, actually. If this would focus, that would be nice. So, yeah, there's no visible bind off, right? Yeah, it just looks like continuous stitches, which is really quite nice. I believe I will finish this, probably even, like, I'll go home after the interview, and as I eat something, or perhaps as I take a bit of a break to debrief from the interview, I believe I'll probably finish this even by the end of the today. I really banged these socks out very fast. I think I did this one in about a day. Granted, it was fairly non-stop knitting. I had a weekend. Not quite a day, actually. Probably more over a weekend. 2 days of non-stop knitting. 1.5. But I banged that out, and then I started this one very, shortly after. The sock needles that I prefer are, because I've tried almost everything. I've tried Magic Loop. I've tried, having, double-pointed needles. And I have the Chalgu, shorties, twisties set, where basically they're interchangeables, but you just have, a smaller cable and tinier needles. I enjoy these the most. They are 3 separate needles that have a flexible inner, and you just pretty much, they're like double-pointed needles, but because of the flexibility of the shape, I find that it's less finicky to keep all the stitches on the needles than, say, essentially a metal skewer that you're navigating. Because I also knit on the go quite a bit, there's only 2 needles to juggle with in a go, and I can just put these things on the ends of all my needles, and it doesn't pierce the project back that I'm working with. It doesn't destroy, just poke through my various belongings. So these have been the needles I've come to prefer. I met up with a friend yesterday, and I was teaching her how to knit, and I actually loaned her all my other sock knitting stuff, just so she has a few options she can go through. So I don't have any of that other stuff to show you, but I like these the most. They are quite expensive. I think I paid probably $40 for these, which is quite expensive, for a set of needles, but it's really worth it. I have completely forgotten the name. They're ADDI ones, ADDI ones, definitely. I'll see if I can find a link and include it somewhere. Yeah. I may pop in, because I'm parked at the mall right now. I believe I may pop into the mall and get myself a coffee or a boba or something, just to be like, hey, you're here, settle yourself, have a little sweetie treaty, which is a phrase that I picked up from a friend, and I can't
removed from my vocabulary, unfortunately. But I think I might just yap a little bit about books I've been reading recently. So I'm still going through Robin Hobb, and I'm alternating between reading that as an audiobook and as an ebook. I actually don't read physical books anymore, just because I do a lot of my reading on the go, and I just have so much stuff already, and I get the stories if I read it as an ebook or some kind of digital format, but I don't have the bulk of it. Like, I don't have to store it somewhere. I do realize this is somewhat of a controversial opinion, and I understand if you prefer to read a physical book. I think, ironically, because I am a librarian by my job title, ironically, I find that working in libraries has removed more of the luster of books for me. So, yeah, I don't read physical books so much anymore. It is also like working in libraries, because books end up being a part of your job that you have to manage, and so there is inherent to a part of it is you have to maintain the collection that is in your library, and I think this is possibly what some people might find like very like sacrilege, but you do have to like weed and withdraw these books because they become damaged or they are no longer relevant. Or like other material has updated that, or quite frankly, it's just you only have so much storage space, and I think working in libraries has just really removed that like preciousness of a physical item for me. I don't think it's to my detriment. I don't think I've lost something by working in libraries for that. But when people talk about like the smell of old books, I don't really feel that anymore. It's really interesting. And I very much like, I think also, if I'm completely honest again, another part of libraries is you kind of see like the negative sides of it being a public space. So I have had to withdraw books, for example, because they've just been very disgusting, because of how they've been returned. I remember one time someone like deposited a used nappy into the return bin, so we had to withdraw everything in that return bin, like all the items, and that would have been like, for the cost of the books, that would have been thousands of dollars. And someone had just literally dropped like feces across all the books. Yeah. So I'm not really so much into physical books anymore. I should also clarify, like, libraries do have like cleanliness standards. That we withdrew those books is reflective of like that we maintain these collections and we don't allow something that is not hygienic or to come into like contact with the public, like like just to reassure you, library books do have like cleanliness standards, but for a combination of reasons, I don't read physical books so much anymore. I'm very much a digital girly. And I've been reading the last two books of the Tawny Man trilogy. I probably hadn't even started the first one the last time I made a video. So I've been reading the Tawny Man trilogy by Robin Hobb. It is the second installment directly from Fitz's chivalry farcier's perspective. And I understand that he would have been a child in the first trilogy, the Assassin's Apprentice trilogy, etc. I haven't read those. I kind of have no desire to read them just because I know that Fitz goes through like hell and back, and I'm not really interested in reading about suffering. Although I'm sure the story it's very well written. But the trilogy that I'm reading now it's happened after the life ship traders, and then you come back to this entirely new kingdom, where Fitzchivalry, he is a bastard of like the Rain lineage, so he has no claim to the throne. But because he is technically of the royal line, he gets put into the position of serving the Farseer throne as an assassin, and that's the first trilogy. He is now, like, I understand, probably late 30s in this trilogy. He took a while where he stepped back from all that and he lived a very quiet life. And unfortunately, he gets dragged back into the intrigue and the plotting, the political plotting of the Farseer court, because he has people and stories that won't leave him behind. Of significance to Fitz is the Fool, and the whole stories with Fitz center around him. Like, there's just a very strong duo partnership, combination of characters in the Fitz and the Fool. In the final trilogy, which wraps together all the threads of all of Robin Hobb's books and ends with that trilogy, is actually is just called the Fitz and the Fool, and you have the books. But as always, Robin Hobb writes brilliant characters, brilliant, like, just political plotting. It's very interesting because, as opposed to the other books like the Live Trip Traders, which is what I started with, they're all written in the third person and the perspective skips. So you'll have like a chapter that starts with like Althea or Wintro. But Fitz his books are written entirely in the first person and only through Fitz's perspective. I really feel Robin Hobb has a kind of intimacy and knowing of Fitz as a character that you jump into his perspective, and this is someone who hadn't read the first trilogy. You jump into his perspective, and it's just like the tone is different. You really just feel like she knows this character very well, and I even understand that there's a period later where she dedicates the books to my good friend Fitz. She tortures him a lot for someone who's a good friend, by the way. But that's something that was very welcome to me. Like, and this is I really loved the Live Ship Traders. I really love the characters in there. But she just knows Fitz so well, and like the tone shift is just so like intuitive, so personal. I believe I'll try not to give out any spoilers, but Fitz has like an animal bond magic called the Wit, and it's just you're persecuted for having that. You are burned at the stake if you are found having that, and a lot of the political intrigue and a lot of the stakes and the danger come because of this, like, because of the bigotry against this kind of magic. Fitz has it. And he has his bond is with a wolf called Night Eyes. And there's a very beautiful and poignant segment. I believe it's chapter 7. I saw this reel on Instagram where this girl was just like, when you read, it's chapter 6, when you get to chapter 6 of, I forgot what the first one is called, the first one in the day, and then she's just like crying, and I'm like, I bet it's the one that I'm thinking of. And it was. I checked. But very beautifully written. Absolutely cried buckets. I was thinking about that for a while. Yeah, it's you can tell these are very beloved and intimate characters for Robin Hobb. I really enjoy the audiobooks. I did not enjoy the audiobook narrator of the Live Ship Traders, I have to be honest. But this one is narrated by someone who gives gives a different voice to each of the characters. He does Fitz very well. He does the like kind of like the haughty Jamalian voice of Lord Golden very well, and then switches it to, because the Fool has multiple like facades and faces that he shows, so you can hear the differences. I believe he does Shade and Thick very well as well. Like, you can definitely hear the characterization coming through there. I'm really enjoying them. There's nothing more to say. You know, when you open a Robin Hobb book that you're just in for like a cracker of a story, just very well developed. You know that there's gonna be like, it doesn't, like, it's not shallow, if that makes sense. It's not like, like, I'm going to... I don't quite know how to describe it, but you just know that it won't be shallow. I am expecting to... I know vaguely the big points in the book, just because these have been out for a while and people have been telling me to read them for so long. And there's a particular... I'm on the third one right now, Fool's Fate. And I'm really, really not looking forward to what happens to the Fool. But I must read through it. I know there's ultimately a happy ending for them. In Robin Hobb's understanding of what happy is, I don't know. But I'm not anticipating with pleasure the idea of having to go through that segment that I know is coming. But yeah, cracker of a fantasy. If you have any recommendations for fantasy I should try after this series, please do let me know. I have a friend, she is Dev. She is the Retired Knight on Instagram. She's recommended that I try Heretical Fishing after this. So I will, she also knows that writer in person. I think, Dev does a lot of, like, indie, beta reading. I believe, so Heretical Fishing she has recommended. I think it's like Dungeon Crawler Carl, by something Dinneman. Like, it's a kind of like lit RPG style book, which I've never read. So we'll see how that goes. I feel it's the kind of thing that would be very easy to get into. But do please let me know if you have any recommendations for fantasy books otherwise. I believe I may go for my interview now. I'm just gonna go find the site, probably sit outside and just have a breather for a bit. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a lovely day, and please do let me know what you're working on. And if you enjoyed this video, please like... what's the thing? Subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much.